I don't know when folks on this call bought their first harmonium. I bought my first harmonium in 2006, and I didn't know any better, and I played it, and I kind of liked it. And it seemed like it was starting to fall apart a little bit, and I didn't have access to a repair person, so I ordered another one, and I didn't like it as much. And then I bought another one, and I didn't like that so much. And it's like this is what this is what used to happen all the time. It's like, why does my harmonium, I have to pump it like crazy because it's only got like 2 or 3 seconds sustain. What's going on? Or I've got a buzzy reed, or I've got a sticky key, or I've got, this one's out of tune, or my knob broke or something. It's like a million things would go wrong with the harmoniums, and a lot of times when you would get them, they'd have problems, you know. And so one of the really cool things that happened when I got my Bava first from Nick, and we're going to say that was like what, 2013, 2014,
Somewhere in there. Yep.
we're about there, is like everything worked and it sounded great. And the biggest, like, I just wrote 2 blog posts, and one is about sound. So it's called Choosing the Right Harmonium Sound, and it's got a whole bunch of information and distinctions and things to think about. But then all these different sound clips that Nick and his guys at Old Delhi Music made and put up on their YouTube channel, so you can really hear the difference in sound between the instruments. And the other thing is sustain. And I did a blog post called the Harmonium Taste Test, where I compared 5 harmoniums. And in the sustain one, choosing the right harmonium sustain, I pulled out 5 different harmoniums and I played them. And you can hear what they sound like, and you can see how long the sustain is. And so those are really big things, the sound and the sustain. So, Nick, can you tell us? You now have see, it used to be that I was told everyone just get the Bava Mini and get it tuned to A440, and that was it. So Bava Mini means there's 4 different sizes. There's light, there's mini, there's classic, there's studio, and I would say get the mini. And then there's 3 different tunings. You can get cosmic tuning A432, which I kind of think is disastrous tuning, but some people really like it. And you can get A440 concert tuning, and that's what I always recommend. And you can get like no tuning, so they just make the harmonium as close as whatever it shows up as. Like, as if it could be A442 to A438. So I used to say this to people very specifically: get a Bava Mini tuned to A440. That's perfect, right? And most people were very happy with that. But now what's happened is Nick has messed that all up for me, because these harmoniums that he's made have really created a lot more options. So there are the 4 harmoniums, and maybe you can tell us about these, Nick, and why people would want each of these 4. And there's also 3 levels of quality: good, better, and best. And maybe you can describe that. So it kind of gives us 12 different options to pick from, Nick.
And well, and I might back up just a little bit and piggyback on kind of some of what you're describing with regards to, you know, the instrument, and you were happy to receive something that we had basically at that point I would describe it as upcycled, um, where we took something that came out of one of these traditional workshops that we didn't know a lot about at that point in time, but we were just trying to do what we could to deliver the best harmonium we knew how to, which basically meant we would get a harmonium. Sometimes we were refinishing them. Sometimes we were doing, things to fix the aesthetic kind of problems. Always we were pulling the springs apart and adjusting things so that it did have the sustain like you were describing. And just that one example, now we determine what wire is used to make the springs. We determine how many loops are going to be in that spring and the height of that spring. And then every time they install it the same way, and you get a good result every time. So, like, we're just kind of going back and re-engineering everything to be the way that we wanted it to be initially, but we didn't have this fluid relationship with the people who were actually making the instruments. And in fact, we could never communicate with the people who were actually making anything, because there were middlemen who kind of, had their own interests. So we've really kind of gone to, it's a much healthier model, and I hope that just as some kind of evidence of that, I hope that all of you might visit bavaharmonium.com and the About Us section, and you can read some feedback that just some of the people working in our shop have provided. We sent them a few questions, and it made my heart happy to realize like we're doing something not only like good for harmoniums, but good for these people who bring us, make the instruments actually exist. And it's inside. I'm going to talk about a lot of the stuff you see outside, but both inside and outside, everything's been just engineered so that the instruments work well, will last, and anyway, that's enough on that. So Mike's talking about four options. So there's the Bava Lite, the Bava Mini, and I'm going in size order kind of. The Bava Classic, and this is the Bava Studio. Now the Bava Studio, it's 42 keys. It's what I would call a traditional Delhi style or North Indian style harmonium. It's not collapsing. It's just the size that you see right by me. You can move it around. You can easily put it in the trunk of your car. It comes with a case. And if you want full sound and you don't want the negatives associated with a collapsing box, this is a great harmonium. It's called the Studio. Would be an excellent option for any recording kind of situation. Is an excellent option if you want something that's stable to just sit in a yoga studio, or some kind of space, fairly regularly, and you're not. You could never take this on an airplane. That's the one limitation. You're not going to fit. It's too tall, and it wouldn't fit in an overhead compartment. It's actually a little bit lighter weight than the comparable 42 key Bava Classic, which is collapsing and does fit in an overhead compartment. So it has, a few extra knobs, technical guides, and information on what those all do. We won't get into that right now, but just kind of generally, I'll describe. So this one is part of the limited edition, which means this is a cedar box. Cedar sounds great. I'll just put that out there. Wonderful softwood for acoustic instruments. And it has brass hardware, which is something that we've never been able to offer until we went to hardware manufacturers and figured out how to get these things custom. And all the hardware pieces, and this is going to be true on all the Bavas, are die cut, which means they're all interchangeable. So if you ever had a component crack, on some they have hinges and things like that. If anything breaks, you can get an exact replica piece that's the exact same. And that's different because if you go, I just have like a little sample hardware piece. This is this piece is actually cut by hand, and that's the way. So it's a unique size and shape, and you would never be able to get this corner bracket exactly the way that this one is because they're all hand cut, and that's just typical of harmoniums. So we fixed that kind of glitch in the maintenance area on all of these. Yeah. So other thing to note on the limited edition is on the back side of all of these, you're going to see a wooden air valve, which again, just more wood, more resonance. It's positive for sound, and it looks pretty. So Bava Studio limited edition. That's kind of a quick overview on that one.
Nick, let me just
Yeah.
interject here because there's some questions in the chat.
Yeah.
So Nick is gonna, I think you're bringing these forward in terms of the largest to the smallest. So the Studio is the least portable. Okay, it's studio
Correct.
means studio means put it in your studio and leave it there. Put it in your house, put it in your room. The other three, the light, the mini, and the classic will all fit in an airplane overhead. Okay, um, there and the light is the least heavy, correct?
Hmm.
And then the mini, and then the classic. The light does not fold down; it's just as is. In the same
But
way,
it's short and it does fit in an overhead compartment. So
so the light is like the studio because they both
yeah,
don't
here's
collapse.
this is the light, but we'll go in the order you just said, and we'll go from largest to smallest, or
Yeah,
least portable to most portable. So
cool. And I just want to say I fly with my Bava Mini all the time. So okay, let's back to you, Nick.
okay, so if you can see this one, it almost looks a little larger next to me. I don't know if you can remember what that other one looked like, but this one is technically taller when you pop it out of its case and stuff. But it also folds down in this case and becomes a more portable size. It has more to it, and that's why it's maybe a couple pounds heavier actually than the Bava Studio. But if you want the full sound of a 42 key instrument and the full sustain and all those kind of advantages in terms of being just optimal musically speaking, tonally speaking, this would give you that in a 42 key range. This is also just to kind of make things show the comparison. This is also part of that limited edition series, so it's just a cedar framework, brass hardware, and we'll have the same uh, wooden air valve, um, and all these features are going to be consistent between all of the different ones. So it's a level kind of selection in terms of what materials we put into it, but the box is going to be the same whether it's standard edition, limited edition, or concert edition. So this is the Bava Classic. It's the 42 key version of the Mini, which I'll grab next. So the Mini gets a little smaller. So the keyboard's gotten shorter. It's a 32 key, so 10 keys less. So that classic was out to here, and the Mini is just shorter. Um, it also just has two drones. The classic had four because it just had extra room. This is the standard edition. So this is a pine box, um, and everything hardware and stuff is all the traditional silver chrome hardware. This is going to be most equivalent to what we had in the original Bava Mini, the one that Mike's been playing for a long time. But there's some differences. And I brought actually one of my favorite differences is this is an old lid from an old Bava Mini. And right here, we got a lot of complaints about this metal banding that goes around the lid on any Bina 23B or any other Safari style harmonium that preceded this one. So to hopefully to our customers' excitement, we have on this one we've actually banded, and it's kind of I don't know if I can really show you in this, but there's actually a ply that we inserted down in here to create stability, and then we basically did away with all the metal. So when you rest your palm here, you don't have metal digging into your palm. Um, Also, the finish is now it's a satin finish. This is true across all the models, and instead of the uber glossy shellac lacquer kind of look, it's just a little bit more modern kind of thing. Um, and again, all the metal components, even on the standard edition, no more of the handmade metal components that are all unique snowflakes. Everything's been just standardized. So the standard edition mini, and then the smallest of the four kind of frameworks is this Bava Light, which is clearly small because I have to tilt my camera down lower so you can see it. And you know, this one is really probably the most optimal for travel because it weighs the least and it's the smallest. It is not a collapsing box, as Mike noted, but to my delight, we have tried, I think, 3 or 4 different variations, probably starting in like 2015, 2016, of tiny harmoniums because everybody said smaller, smaller, smaller. And, you know, none of them made us really excited. You know, they were all a little weak or left something to be desired. And this one, I think we finally got it. And even though I'm not personally, I'm a sound guy, so I like those 42 key ones that you know, maybe aren't everyone else's favorites, but they sound the best. This one, it's good. So you know, and we're really pleased with the way that things came together in terms of just made a lot of very small engineering decisions to learn from what we'd done previously with the small harmonium. And I think that this one, it's still a small harmonium. It's not going to have the same dynamics or tonal response of those bigger ones that I prefer, but it's pretty good.
I
Yeah.
gotta chime in, Nick. I gotta say, I've probably played or tried every one of those variations of small ones that you had created along the way, and honestly, I didn't really like them. I recommended them only to folks who were like maybe someone who is frail or pretty old, or you know, where the weight just really mattered the most. But your guys sent me one of these brand new Bava lights, and I played it, and I was like, wow, okay, like the sustain and the sound to me are as strong as the minis have been, and that is like a game changer for me. So I started recommending these to folks because I think in this new and improved version, um, and I just had a standard one, so I didn't have a fancier cedar version or a fancier teak version.
Mhm.
I just had the basic pine that they sent over, and it sounded great. So I think I would recommend this one if somebody's, you know, thinking about um, you know, portability and weight really matters, but I still want good sound and good sustain.
Yeah.
I think it really hits the mark.
Yeah, yeah. So that's a good kind of rundown on the light. The thing that I'll note here with this one, I'll try to. So do you see that joint there on the side? Um, it's kind of, it comes together like little puzzle pieces interlocking. That's called dovetail jointing. So on the concert edition models, the full story is I sent, they've never done this on harmoniums, but a lot of the fun stuff that we've been doing is getting like legitimate tools into the shop, which all the craftsmen are loving. So one of those tools is you know, to make these dovetails, you have to have like a jig that just like has fingers, and you run a router down that jig and set it up so that you can create those interlocking pieces. So I actually, we have a 24-inch jig in the shop that I schlepped with me in in a large suitcase. To India, and then we have a 12-inch one that I sent there because you literally can't buy these tools in India. They just don't exist in India to purchase. But we have got them there, and and if you can get them the tools, these guys are incredible carpenters, and they do really great work. So this one, that joint, if you wanted to make this harmonium come apart, you would have to get a saw and cut this harmonium apart. That joint is never unlocking because those little edges there are actually, they have a 14-degree just like, you know, curve to them where they can't be pulled apart. So this is a really solid, really well made, truly like heirloom quality instrument, which doesn't mean it's never going to require maintenance, but it does mean that it's built to be stable. And I see some of the questions that are coming in, which are a lot of them are around maintenance. So I'm happy to talk about those things.
One,
But yeah, go ahead.
but one question that is important here, I think, is that you said that the classic and the studio have 42 keys.
True.
And what's the number on the mini and what's the number on the light for number of keys?
32 and 32.
32 and 32. I'll
Yeah.
tell you, okay, so these are the kind of harmoniums that Western kirtan artists play. We had a big conversation about this a couple weeks ago in our public talk. This is the Krishna Das sound. It's two banks of reeds. And I will tell you that I do not play all of the keys on my harmonium. Okay, there's notes, probably the C to the F. Maybe the F is as low as I go on my harmonium. So I have one, two, three, four, five keys. I almost never, ever in a year play, right? At the bottom. And then at the top, I would say I have for sure another three. So that's eight keys. So I have a 32 key keyboard, but I'm only playing 24 of them. So, I don't know that there's a huge advantage to having 42 keys, other than the fact that it's a larger instrument with a bigger sound. Would you agree, Nick, or do you have a different perspective?
Yeah, well, I agree that you don't need the extra keys necessarily. If you want the most acoustic resonance, though, out of those keys, you get that from a larger box, and you get that from more air flowing through your instrument. Um, Air and wood. That's the a lot of people. If you get really nerdy and you read like online forums where people are talking about what makes good harmonium tone, they'll get all messed up talking about like um, different reed manufacturers and this kind of stuff. If you have great reeds and you put them into a bad box, they're going to sound terrible. The box and the fundamentals of that shape and how it was made, that's more important than the reeds. I can make harmoniums that have a good foundation and have maybe kind of modest, quality reeds. I can make that harmonium sound pretty good. You can't make something that is fundamentally, poorly constructed with great reeds. You can't make that sound good. So.
Do you want to tell us, now that you've talked about the four different shapes, do you want to talk a little bit about the three levels of quality, and then we can address some of these maintenance questions?
Yeah, yeah. So hopefully I've kind of explained that in the midst of this. So I showed you the mini, that was the standard edition, that's pine. Limited edition is cedar, and the concert edition is teak. The pine and the cedar are both going to be traditional joint work and softwood. The teak is hardwood. It is going to be heavier. You should note that. It's going to be about 15-20% heavier, and that's just the nature of the wood being more dense, I guess. And there's some differences in the hardware and the fittings, and I showed you the difference in the air valves and these kind of features. So it just, but it's kind of like you described. It's good, better, best. All the very best stuff goes into that concert edition, and the standard edition is still very good.
There are two more variables here. So one is the tuning, and I mentioned the tuning before, and I really encourage people to get Concert A440 tuning. I was telling this story about last time I was on the call here a couple weeks ago with Nick, where we had a kirtan leader intensive, and we had about 10 people out on our back porch, and we started playing an ohm together, and someone's harmonium sounded terrible. So we're trying to figure out who is it, who is it, who is it. Well, it's this one lady, and she didn't even know that she had the A432 tuning, the cosmic tuning. She accidentally got it. I think she meant to get the A440. Have you guys gotten her squared away, Nick? Is she sorted that
Yeah,
out?
yep.
Yeah, okay, good. So we just replaced her harmonium, but if your harmonium's 432 and you're playing with other musicians, it's not going to work well. So A440 is the way to go, and you will annoy the other musicians if you show up with A4 432, or if you show up with what's called equal tuning, and so that just means however the harmonium shows up, they're going to make the whole thing standard, but it's not necessarily going to be standard to A440. So the whole thing might be at 442, 438, somewhere in between. So that's one thing, but we can really, I think, I'm going to advocate from my perspective, forget about all that. There's no choice there. Just get A440. But there are color options, right?
Yeah, there are from time to time, and they're not always going to be available. So, just whenever you buy, the color options that are available are what we have. So
I remember a while back you had like a chocolate espresso version of the mini, and you had a
we
cherry red, and
we currently have a really nice dark toned limited edition studio. The I really love the mahogany red kind of color that we have, and that's available with the mini. Well, I think with all of them. The one that I just had, the studio is not online, but we just got them. Um, it's a great color, at least when I'm sitting here looking at it. It's really pretty. Um, we have a darker brown version of the mini than the lighter pine, more natural pine color that I showed, and that darker it's maybe kind of a medium brown tone, and that one's going to be available soon in limited quantities, and but it looks really nice too. So yeah, color variations will come and go,
yeah.
but
Remember
yeah.
our beloved vocalist Anya Dresser got a hold of one of those cherry red um, Bava minis, and she's not letting go of it. Those were only
Okay.
around for a small amount of time, so
Yeah.
she loves that one. Someone is asking, Karina is asking. I've mentioned you're gonna like this, Nick. I mentioned in previous classes that the Bava Mini has a music stand place for music. So what that means is I've been inviting people to take well, you can't really see it because of my virtual
Hmm.
background, but a pad or a clipboard, and there's a little bit of space in between the bellows and the box, and you can just drop it right in there and have basically a music stand. And that makes it a lot easier because it's hard to look down and look over and down and over. So, Corinne is asking, will which of the four styles will have that kind of music stand?
So the Safari styles, so the classic and the mini, those two have that, and nothing has changed about that box. It's still, we've stuck to, some minor things have changed, but that's remained consistent.
Cool. And I made, again, like, I really want to point folks over to the kirtanleader.com website and my blog because I have made blog posts with pictures and videos and words and all kinds of cool stuff on so many of these topics. Last time people were like, what are those knob thingies? So I got one on that. And what's up with the music stand? So I give a whole bunch of options and the sound and the sustain, all that good stuff. So okay, so we got some color options, we got tuning options, we got four different shapes, and we got three different levels of quality. Yeah.
Hmm.
So if you're completely confused, two things. One is you could call Nick and Jacob over at Old Delhi Music and say, "Yo, which one's best for me?" and tell them your unique situation. But I would say if weight and portability are critical, then I would go with the light or the mini. Okay, and now you jump in and correct me if you disagree. But if you're thinking like, hey, look, 12 pounds versus 16 pounds, that actually makes a big difference because maybe in New York City and I'm walking around with it everywhere, blocks and blocks and blocks, or maybe I fly a lot. I would go with one of those two. if sound quality is really important, I would go with the classic or the studio. And if you're not sure which of those to go for, I would say the studio if you're pretty much going to leave it in one spot, and the classic if you're going to be moving it around. Now, most women, I've had women who have bought classics and then they come back to me and they say, I don't like this thing. It's kind of heavy and it's kind of bulky and it's a lot for me to carry around. And I'm a yoga teacher and I'm going up and down stairs and in and out of cars and, give me a mini. And that, so if that sounds like it could be you, you might want a mini rather than a classic. But if you're really going for that sound, the classic in the studio, and then to
Or
what?
if you just want to pump less. Like I visited with one of our customers up in northern Michigan. She runs this bed and breakfast, and she teaches yoga classes there a couple times a week, and just a great person. And she's mid 70s, doing great, but a small mid 70s yogi kind of lady, and she loves her Bava Classic because she doesn't have to pump that thing hardly at all because it just keeps going and going and going naturally. So there are circumstances where you might be the yogi that Mike is describing, and you might actually, because it's just more optimal in terms of the internal kind of engineering and functionality, and it has more air and more wood and everything like I'm describing. Maybe there are situations where it works, but certainly if you're taking it all around, it's going to be heavier and not as conducive. So
So Ja wants to pump less, Jeffrey Haney. So you're saying the bigger the instrument, the less the pump because the greater the sustain. Is that right?
correct. Yeah.
Now, here's a question. Your guy sent me a Bava Classic Teak, which is the high end, which is the concert. And I played that thing and it had like a 400-second sustain. I was like, whoa.
That's
So
false advertising, but
maybe slight exaggeration. So my question for you is, to what degree is the sound and the sustain impacted by the three levels of quality?
the sustain really isn't impacted by the level of quality. The sound is impacted. I would describe, from like kind of warm to warm and more clarity to very clear is kind of the trajectory when you go from pine to cedar to teak. So if you want that sound where you hear sounds that you didn't even know were there or were possible, you're going to get that from the teak. If you want that sound that's really has more emphasis, a little less clarity, but still a good amount of clarity and a lot of warmth, that cedar is, like I said, it's a really nice in between. And then the traditional pine, uh, it's probably more on the warm end than it is on the clarity end of the spectrum. So that's any of them sound good. Any of them sound like nice harmoniums, but the teak definitely is the most crystally kind of the sounds. We have some videos that are coming out that just do kind of side by side, moving from one to the next, doing the same chord comparisons. So two of those are already on YouTube, and two of those, if you bug me throughout this week, I will get them on YouTube. They're filmed, they're just not on YouTube yet.
Okay, so Jeffrey Haney just placed this order, Baba Studio Teak, and that's pretty exciting. That's a serious instrument right there. And Karina wants to know what are the weights of all of these? Can you tell us the weight for each instrument?
Um, in general, and I said that they do change from one version to the other, but I'll just give the numbers at kind of the low end. The light is around 12 pounds. The mini is around 16 pounds. The classic is going to be actually around 21, 22 pounds. The studio is going to be maybe a pound or so less than that classic, just because there's a little less bulk to the overall construction. So, but around, you can say around, starting around 20 pounds is where the studio kind of framework lands. If you make that studio like the one Jeffrey ordered, if you make that in the teak, that does increase the weight by, like I said, around 20% or so. So it's gonna end up closer to 25 pounds or so for that teak model. Totally worth it. I've carried around one of those teaks for years, and they're great. A different model, different harmonium, but I think teak harmoniums are wonderful.